Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Jnanavarthini, FDBPI's weekly knowledge sharing session. With the ever-evolving technologies, we all agree that it's essential for organizations to stay ahead of the curve by proactively implementing compliance measures. Secure data disposal is a key control to prevent data leakages and thus ensuring compliance. Our speaker for today, Mr. Santosh Kamane, will be talking about the best practices in secure data disposal to mitigate the risk. Mr. Santosh is an information security leader and CISO with over 18 years of experience in building information security and risk management programs. His passion is building secure and resilient environments and information security programs with cybersecurity as a business enabler as well as a competitive differentiator. He is co-founder and CEO of CyberFIT Solutions. CyberFIT offers data security products and solutions that help organizations to securely erase sensitive data in files, drive, and removable media. Welcome, Mr. Santosh. Very happy to have you here. Over to you.
Thank you, Manju, and good evening, everybody, for joining this session. And thank you, Navi sir, Manju, FDPPI for organizing this session so well. All right, so I think we'll get started. Secure data disposal, right? I mean, this is one topic that we do not talk about very often because most of us, kind of think that, what is so worrying about data disposal, right? Because if I'm deleting my files, which is my means of disposal, if I am, formatting my computer, then what could be the risk, right? Data is all, kind of wiped. So what could be the potential data leakage, right? So that's something, we'll go through. Like I was saying, this is not a topic that is, oftenly, discussed, but it does have some significant risks. And we'll look at it, from a conceptual standpoint today. Now, going next, I thought, we'll start with a real story here. And this is taken from September 2022. The name is Morgan Stanley, right? And the name was all over major media outlets for all wrong things. So what happened? Morgan Stanley, as we know, they are mainly into cash equity, a big name. And as a practice, they had arrangement with one of their vendors to destroy their hard drives physically, right? And these drives, then, once you destroy, obviously that marks the compliance and make sure that data is permanently disposed. Now, in this arrangement, what happened, this particular vendor somehow, there was a lapse in the process. And these hard drives were found in auction. And imagine, data of, almost 15 million customers, and there was a fine penalty. So this was, kind of a major news in the sense that, when the hard drives were put out, in auction, the bad actors, cyber criminals or whatever you call them, they could easily, recover that data. Now, why I'm saying that, they could recover that data is for, two reasons. One is today all of us think that, when you delete format, that's just, more than enough. And post that, data cannot be recovered, right? So in the sense, that's what creates a risk. Because like Morgan Stanley, all of us have sensitive data. So in this session, what we'll do, we'll look at, this data disposal risk. We'll also look at, possible risk scenarios. What could be a remedy? What does compliance ask in terms of secure data disposal? And then we'll also talk about a digital data trader called Wipeout. Now, data is everywhere that all of us know. I think data governance is the biggest challenge today, right? I mean, if you go to any organization, there is structured data, unstructured data. Nobody knows, what assets have, what kind of data. And if you see the common misconception that even I would say the technology folks today have is that my sensitive data is only customer data or financial data or, just PII. But most of us do not think that, there could be a source code. My source code may have some vulnerabilities. My source code may have a business logic. That is crucial to me because, if my rival, business rival gets hold of my, business logic through my source code, they can easily be, ahead of me, right, in terms of business competition. And then there are internal documents, design documents. So there is a lot of data today, and data governance is the biggest challenge. And if you see, especially earlier, before this whole digital transformation, with papers, the information was sort of, limited, restricted. We hardly created, copies of the paper information. There were, limited photocopies and all of that. But protecting that information was relatively easier. But today, once you create any data, let's say you create any email, it's so easy to, forward it to anybody, create multiple copies. Those copies can go to your USB drives, your, shared drives. The main reason, most of us think that, now this is the era of cloud. And what cloud means is that, there is unlimited storage. So that's the misconception, some of us live in, and then, we keep creating data on and on, without realizing that, this could be a sensitive data that might be compromised. Now, with that background and context, data has its own life cycle in every organization. Like if you see today, either we create data in terms of, new files, folders, Excel sheet, database records. So we create, or we acquire, or we collect. I mean, those who are in privacy, they very well know, data is collected from your data processors as well. So then you store that data, you use that data, you share that data. There are multiple use cases, and depending on your retention policy, then organizations archive and then they destroy as a last step. Now, fortunately, in all the phases except the last phase, if you see, there are number of matured controls. Like for example, if you're collecting data, we know that consent is important. You could collect it when it is encrypted. When you store, we could make sure that it is masked. Then when it is shared, we use different DLP products. We use authorization with whom we are sharing. So there are a number of tools, processes, controls available to protect at that stage. But if you see at data destruction, this is when most of us unfortunately think that when I delete, format, or I discard my asset, whether I destroy it or donate it, when my asset reaches its end of life, that's it. It's done, right? And that's where the challenge is. Merely deleting, formatting is not going to be a permanent eraser. Because if you take, let's say, if you delete any file or format your drive, and today if you walk into any IT shop, service center, and ask for data retrieval or recovery, they can pretty much easily recover that data because there are multiple data recovery tools available, right? And that all of us have seen, in the past also, when my external hard drive was broken, I walked into the IT shop and he was able to at least some directories, recover some directories. So data recovery is possible. Now, the risk is that what if that data is sensitive and the person who is recovering has a malicious intent, right? Then it's a huge risk. Now, the risk, mainly two things, right? When you delete a file, what happens? The data is hidden from operating system's view. So the data is still present on your hard drive blocks, but then the operating system cannot see it. So we think that, data is kind of, not available anymore. Format, what it does, format simply, creates a new file system. Those, in the past, you may have formatted your, computers. It creates a new file system. It deletes any references to the file tables, but then, data is still present in those blocks, right? So this is a known risk, at least from a compliance perspective. So that's why if you look at all major compliances, be it NIST, GDPR, PCI DSS, ISO, which is very common, all of them, they have a mandatory control that typically calls for, secure, let's say, media sanitization, secure data disposal. The names may vary, but given that the risk still exists, they ask that, you implement some controls to make sure that data is disposed correctly. The other analogy could be in the past, or even today, for paper files, especially in the banks, or entities who process a lot of paper data. We have seen these paper shredders. So every time you realize that this is confidential document, but I don't need it any longer, right? You would go and shred that document, and then that document, the information and that document, then nobody can reconstruct, right? That's the advantage. Because in the past, there was another risk. You must have heard about this dumpster driving, especially, these cyber criminals, they would try to, let's say, collect those paper files from the janitors, and then, see if they can recover the data, right? So we need something similar for digital data also, given the risk. Let's see what options we have available now that, we know what the risk is, right? So a couple of things, you could simply destroy the device itself. Like if I'm storing, all my sensitive data, all my applications, documents on a hard drive, so why not physically destroy it? So let's not keep any remains of that data. And, most of the compliances, they ask for it, especially those who are stringent. In defense, in fact, it is a very, very common practice to destroy the device itself, so that there is no longer, any risk. The other method that was used in the past, and it's still being used in some cases, it's degausser. Now, what this machine would do, if you see the traditional hard drives, they used to store information on those magnetic fields, right, on the magnetic tracks. And this degausser machine, what essentially does, it has a strong demagnetizing polarity, and it would totally, change the polarity or realign the magnetic fields. With that, data becomes sort of, inaccessible. It cannot be recovered. So that was one method. And these two methods typically fall under physical destruction, mainly. And there is third method, other than physical destruction, which we call software wiping. There are a couple of known methods here. Overwriting, crypto shredding. I think we will know more, once we go to next slides. So we'll talk about all these three. Physical destruction. Like I was saying, it was very common practice in defense, and especially if you see even the NIST, higher levels, or CMMC, level 2, level 3 for suppliers, they would demand that all the entities processing sensitive data or accessing sensitive data, they physically destroy their hard drives and also maintain the certificate of destruction. It's still common practice in some companies. There are clear specifications laid out there, like, when you shred, like for example, NIST says that, you can shred almost like as small as, 3 pieces, so that you cannot recover it. Then there are other devices, you can crush it, like big hammer-like device. You could burn that device at a high temperature. So all of these methods are actually very common, especially at the facilities that we typically call ITAD, ITAD, IT asset disposal, uh, agencies or companies. They are specialized into destroying this hardware with the specifications, and they will give you this certificate. And then degaussr, we already kind of noticed, right? So this has worked as a control. There are some challenges with this, but let's see. Like one example would be we spoke about Morgan Stanley case, right? The vendor was supposed to destroy the device. That process was not followed, and instead, the data was available on hard drives through auction. So it was a huge embarrassment for the bank. It was huge risk. So if you see, the third-party governance is the key here, right? When you trust a third-party vendor to destroy your physical devices, you need to have a strong due diligence and due care, right? Degaussr, again, the challenge with degaussers is that, these machines are very, very hefty, big. They are expensive. There was a time, when the average price was almost like 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs. And a lot of companies, they did not have that logistics set up to manage that. And again, if you do it with the third party, then again, there is that risk, right? Plus, from an environment standpoint, when you operate or when you are in contact with such strong magnetic fields, there could be a potential risk to the people's safety. So this is a little bit background on degaussers and physical destruction, right? So now with these two methods, what could be the risk, right? Why do we think they do not work? So like Morgan Stanley case, there are other cases. Third party, you might tie up with a third party for this arrangement. You can outsource this, but then are you sure that your data is not stolen? So the whole risk assessment, outsourcing governance, it's the key, right? And it has already happened. The second thing with physical destruction is that we invest so much into hardware assets. The asset that could be donated, the asset that could be reused, now just because compliance is driving, you destroy it before its end of life. So from a ROI standpoint, if you go to your CFO, he's not going to be happy, right? That you have spent, let's say, 2 lakhs on a corporate laptop, and then you're destroying it, just right after 2 years because new hardware is available. The third is e-waste. Destroying e-waste is not easy. We all know that, from mobiles to laptops to servers to network equipments, routers, there is so much of hardware equipment out there today, and destroying it is painful to the human health, and as a process, it has its own risk. So that's why reuse, recycling, these methods are promoted. So this is another risk from a people safety, environment safety. Degausser limitations we already spoke about. Governance we already spoke about when you outsource it to the third party, right? Now with these two methods, these are all from last year, 2022 breaches. I think most of us are not aware that this is happening. And one challenge I would highlight here, today, if you see most of the breaches, let's say a ransomware attack, let's say somebody is trying to attack your web server through SQL injection, all this type of fancy data breaches, it's in a way easier to detect because the logs will be created, right? When somebody accesses your firewall and then accesses your machine, they would leave a trace on your VPN device, on your firewall device, in your SIM solutions. So in some cases, you may not prevent it, but then that there was some activity, something was stolen, there was an unauthorized access. But with these kind of data leakages, how do you even detect, right? How do you even track any log? Because I did not, wipe it securely. Now my assets are, somebody is accessing it, remotely, installs recovery tool, and then there is no trace left, or, my hard drive is stolen, laptop is stolen. So there is no really trace. So most of these incidents may not even come to light like other cyber breaches. So that's one thing. So with that, data erasure is becoming even more serious risk. ITAD, the entire market is growing at a huge rate. There are multiple instances. I think we have, sort of enough background on, the risk that we are referring to. So the question is, what could be a better data wiping method? My compliance may be asking me to physically destroy, but is there anything I can do to make sure that, my vendor, my third party, or if my laptop is stolen, nobody installs these data recovery tools and, gets hold of my data. So we need a tool, first of all, permanent eraser should be addressed, should be internal. We don't want any third party, because the entire data lifecycle that we saw earlier, the security of all those stages from data collection to data erasure, that is the responsibility of the organization. So why outsource it to third party, right? So it should be internal to the organization. Then it should meet compliance, and then it should give me the flexibility for shredding. Now, by on demand, what I mean is that when you physically destroy the device, you would destroy it only when you're, let's say, about to retire that asset, you're about to decommission, you're about to, sort of, that the asset has reached its end of life, right? So that is more of one-time disposal. So by on demand, what I mean that, let's say I have collected sensitive data, it's sitting on my laptop in the form of Excel sheet. So can I just delete, sorry, or let's say wipe out or permanently erase that particular file on demand at that moment without waiting for my laptop to, reach its end of life? So I mitigate that risk right then and there. And then it should be, easy to use. It doesn't have to be too complicated. Physical destruction, degaussor, they all require, certain expertise. That's why it is outsourced to third parties. So what could be that option? So that option is software wiping. Why software wiping? Because you can use this method yourself on your device. So what software wiping essentially does, let's say you deleted something that that is no longer required for any processing. And that data may be a duplicate, it may be temporarily stored, sensitive data on a wrong asset. So what software wiping would do, it will override those deleted spaces with certain algorithms of zeros and ones. There are multiple algorithms, like what we call carefully selected patterns. And you can run this algorithm or, override those spaces with multiple passes. Like you can do it 1 pass, 2 pass, 3 pass, like iterations. And that is known to be a safer method. It is accepted by even NIST also. And NIST says that even 1 pass is enough and that data cannot be recovered. So this is indeed a solution that most organizations now are adopting, because if you see, this is internal, all you need is a software that allows me to run this software wiping and meets my compliance, right? The pros, if we talk about, it's not going to destroy your asset. It is software data wiping. So the asset value is intact. So you can go to your CFO and say that, okay, my laptop can be reused. We could donate it. It meets compliance, and then you don't need any third party, right? Because even if you need third party, you can still destroy through software wiping data and then give it to third party for physical restriction, so that you know that physical party cannot misuse that data or extract that data from the device. We spoke about compliance, and these are just few key compliances I thought I'll put out. But you go to NIST, GDPR, GLBA, SOC 2, ISO, all of them, they have mandatory controls. In like the language may vary, but then they do ask for media sanitization, hard drive, destruction, sensitive data disposal, secure disposal, because this risk is known. So software data wiping, physical data destruction, all they meet compliance, but then software data wiping has additional benefits that we saw earlier, right? So everything that we spoke about so far, does it really happen on, endpoints, my laptop, my server, or, my mobile devices? Not really. The risk is on every device pretty much. So this is the reason I put out this particular screenshot, is because this is from pretty much last week. And what happened, a lot of companies, as you know, that when they go through technology refresh, they keep discarding their routers. So this one investigation agency per se, what they did, they bought multiple or several network routers from the companies, who buy these discarded routers. And what they noticed that, number one, almost like over 70%, their configuration was not erased. They still had the, network configuration, running configuration, routing paths, all available on their routers, right? And they were not wiped, because router has its own memory. It can store its running configuration, right? Now, some of us might think that, okay, what's there in a router? So router has your IP schemes. Router knows what services, what protocols are allowed. Router knows what third parties you have opened up firewall rules. If those firewall rules are not properly configured or not stringent, somebody can exploit that weakness, right? So router configuration is a very, technology sensitive information, and it needs to be protected. So this risk that we are talking about, secure data disposal, it applies to all devices that have memory, including your printers. It could be your scanners. They have their own limited memory where they store sensitive data. Now, from a privacy standpoint, because I think on this forum, especially, there are a lot of privacy professionals. Now, the privacy compliance requirements, they do not directly say that, you have to use, let's say, software wiping or physical destruction. But all of us know that, there are clauses like right to be deleted, right to be forgotten, right to erasure, right to delete. All these clauses are present in these various privacy regulations. And what it means that as a consumer, let's say, I hold a credit card from ABC Bank, and I no longer have active engagement with this ABC Bank. And then I have a right as a data subject to call the bank and tell them that my data should be erased from your system, right? And then bank has to process that deletion request, and typically, within 10 days, or pretty much, if you have to talk about mandatory time frames, within 30-45 days, they should take care of that secure data erasure. Now imagine, if somebody's not using secure wiping methods, and entity is saying that I have deleted your data. So as a consumer, you can relax, but then your data is at risk because it was not securely destroyed. Tomorrow, if that bank's assets were accessed by, unauthorized element, he could simply recover that data, right, from your databases, from your Excel sheets. because data just, it's in very unstructured form today across all the organizations. Very few organizations manage data governance well. So from a privacy standpoint, it becomes very essential that when you talk about data eraser, it's all the traces are gone. It should not be recovered. So this data disposal, the risk that we have been talking about, it does benefit businesses in many ways. Number one, we tend to accumulate data a lot, than required. For example, if you see, let's say HR professionals in average company, right, small to mid-size, the normal tendency is that, collect pre-employment screening data or onboarding data from the new joiners, and then they store it on their laptops, obviously, in the Excel sheets, and they may be deleting it, right? But if they're not securely wiping, imagine, this data can be easily recovered, including those who were offered dropouts or who did not join the organizations. Their data was collected in terms of, let's say PAN card, Aadhaar card. The HR team stored it in Excel sheet on laptop, which itself is a wrong practice, right? Because all such sensitive data is meant to go only in secured environments, like your HRMS system, Workday, PeopleSoft. So all these systems, they are meant to be set up in a secure facility with SOC controls, state-of-the-art security controls, and then that data at least has some security controls implemented. But sitting on laptop, it's a huge risk, and that unfortunately is a standard practice. So this is where it's very important software wiping can be used. Reputation, we have seen one cyber incident and reputation goes for a toss. With reputation, obviously, it's consumer trust. It's just affects organizations in many ways, right? And also, when it comes to data, it's like earlier I was saying, it's not just about my personal data or customer data. Sensitive data is much more. We just don't realize. It could be your internal documents. It could be your NDA that you have signed. It could be a contract that you don't want your competitor to see. So anything which is non-public data, it has to be protected in its entire life cycle. Otherwise, there is a cost, right? So some of the scenarios, like we are saying, we'll go through some risk scenarios. So this one I already covered, like HR executive collecting data, pay slips, employees sitting on desktops, laptops. In the era of remote work, somebody gets access of that particular laptop, and then that's it. Data is, compromised. You can replace HR with a developer. There may be a source code. A company is building that product for a third party. This product is supposed to go live soon. It's patented product, and now that source code, which was sitting on developer's laptop, it's compromised because even when he deleted, it could be recovered, right? So in addition to controls like encryption, software wiping is very important when it comes to data that is no longer required. The bank one, same like HR. I mean, all of us have seen that, especially bank relationship managers, customer support reps, they all have tendency to reach out to new clients, prospects over WhatsApp, collect data, put it on their laptop, fill up these new account opening forms, KYC documents. We don't realize, I mean, we kind of think that, once we put it out, it is secured. You may ask, your relationship manager just to make sure that, are you deleting data? He might say yes, and he will probably delete it also, right, in front of you once the work is done. But, even after delete, data can be recovered. So the risk is not mitigated. And that's the, point. Same with audits. A lot of companies, they don't realize in audits, this is also a key requirement. And then auditors should, given the risk involved. And earlier, like I was saying, it's very difficult to detect these attacks. So better to, in the audit reports, take it as a serious non-compliance issue. Right. I really don't want to, talk much about the product because, the presentation was meant for concept. So we all know what's out there. And then we spoke about the benefits of physical destruction, degaussor. One thing about degaussor, probably I forgot to mention, degaussor demagnetizes the, magnetic field, like I said. So what it means, it will work only on the media, storage media that has magnetic field. But if you see these days, all of us have shifted to SSDs. SSDs don't use magnetic fields. They have flash memory. So with that, degaussor is not going to work with your newer devices. It does not work. So that's another limitations why, that's not efficient solution. And then the other part was degaussor, once you demagnetize, the same hard drive cannot be reused. So, some limitations out there. Right. So physical destruction can be used as a secondary control, definitely. But then, there are other aspects, e-waste and asset ROI. Software wiping is the way you can overwrite, those deleted spaces. Now, what should these solutions do, right? Software wiping. So what if, the solution that you install for software wiping, it is as simple as your antivirus, it just installs, sits in a, taskbar. And what if that solution helps you to permanently erase data with just one click, right? Like today, if you right click and select delete, data is moved to recycle bin, or you can do shift delete, and then it's permanently, deleted, not wiped, deleted. But what if, the overwriting type of sensitive data wiping can be done with just one click? So that's the product we have, Wipeout. And then we are based out of Pune, CyberFIT Solutions. Like I said, I wouldn't go much into the product part of it. The idea was to bring awareness around data disposal risks. And the product that you have, this product should not just be used when asset reaches end of life. The product should be flexible enough or can be used on demand, so that every time you want to delete a single file folder, you can just right click and wipe out. You should be able to remote wipe out on your clients or other devices. Let's say I have users, for example, my finance team. There is a group of 10, right? And then I have invoices with PAN cards, GST numbers, and a lot of sensitive data, maybe payroll also. So this data is sitting on all finance analyst, laptops. So what if, and given that we are all humans, there could be possibility that you forget to delete these documents. So what if there is an option to remote wipe, right? So that something is offered as a part of Wipeout. You can remotely wipe data on the remote machines. So you can designate somebody as a administrator, and then he can implement a policy to remotely wipe. The software also allows you to detect sensitive data in your storage, because that's the challenge. Data is unstructured, data is everywhere. So how do you find your sensitive data? So that's a function which is built in. For those human errors, Wipeout can be scheduled. So basically, if you think that there is a directory called as ABC, where I always keep my payslips, I always keep my sensitive data, you can say that, this is temporary location every Sunday morning, 6 a.m. Wipeout, right? Now, the most important factor, you can do all of this, but where is the artifact or evidence for audit to show that it was done, right? So these softwares, obviously there are other softwares also on the same line, but this has a full data policy compliance, not just wiping full disk. So what if the software also can generate certificate of destruction, which tells you that, what algorithm was used for overwriting, which machine, the serial number of the hard drive, which method was used, how long it took, whether it was successful, and you keep maintaining those certificates. And these certificates are all created in the NIST format, so that, every time you, visit Mr. Auditor, you can show him the certificates to give that additional assurance. And like I was saying, before we go to the last slide, this whole activity has to be, just one click. So what Wipeout, which is our patented product, what we do, like on desktop, if you right click on any file folder, you have option to delete. So similarly, this Wipeout menu is integrated into Windows context menu. And then all you can do, right click, Wipeout, and it will erase permanently, or you can drag and drop. So it's that easier. So the point was that in older times, when it was, or still, anything with the paper shredder, you use paper shredder to make sure that data cannot be, or information cannot be reconstructed. And that pretty much certified your secure disposal process. When it comes to digital data, we know that there are vulnerabilities, there are weaknesses. So how do you do that for secure disposal, right? So that's where, that's the risk that we are trying to address. And I have worked with few banks earlier in their, CISO role, information security role, and then, op risk, people risk, tech risk roles. And I have seen, even the banks, some of them, they do full wipe towards the end of, when they have to retire the asset, or when they provision that asset to a new employee, new contractor, they may be doing, full wipe. Some of the banks do, some of don't do. But then, on demand erasure is what is missing, in companies today. And that's the problem, we are trying to tackle. A wipeout is not just for systems, for database records. It can be integrated into your HRMS, or any custom applications. And we do much more. It can be offered as a service. So that's what we are, and that's our mission, just to make sure that we do take care of data disposal. That's the last step in data lifecycle. With that, I think we also have reached pretty much 7:45. It was a long discussion, so I think I would be happy if we could turn it into interactive session. Let's have some chit chat and talk about this. Right. Sorry, I wasn't monitoring chats earlier. So does anybody have any questions? And then I'll take chat also. Yeah.
There are a few questions in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Santosh, for a very detailed and informative session on this. This is some process, probably seemingly very simple process, but you have thought of all the risks associated with it, the nuances behind the process. And thank you so much for that. We'll take the questions now. The first, we'll finish what is there in the chat first, and then probably somebody else is first.
Sure. So should I, then I'll go ahead with the chat once. Okay.
The first question is from Ms. Reena. Is restricted access to data a means to meet the disposal requirement as decided by any organization, or is it recommended to permanently delete data? Can organization define this as a policy and implement what is industry practice?
Yes. So if you see today, if you go to any organization, most of them, they have security policies in place, right? Like any other policy, like user access policy, access control policy, acceptable usage policy, third-party access policy. Most of the organizations, at least on paper, they do have data retention policy and data disposal policy, right? But when it comes to practice and discipline, that is where we see the challenge. Because most of the stakeholders, number one, they are not aware of this risk that, just deleting, formatting, And even if you physically destroy, there is a risk because third party is involved, right? So what is important is that you have, number one, your data retention policy, because that's when which is my data that is no longer required for processing. And there could be a lot of regulatory aspects too, like some data may be needed to be retained for 2 years, some maybe 7 years, some maybe 5 years. But then when you retain data, it doesn't mean that you retain that data on your laptops and desktops. Obviously, it has to be in a secure storage, which could be your data center, wherever it is, right? Be it cloud or be it this thing. And even there, you follow the secure wiping process, whether like even if you physically destroy. So one is to find one is to build your retention policy, and the second most important part is to build a disposal policy that clearly states disposal on certain non-secure devices has to be done like at certain frequency. It needs to be implemented, it needs to be audited. So that's the practice that we recommend.
Okay. Ms. Reena, would you like to add that question or?
Yeah, thank you. So my question was really to understand whether restricted access control will be considered as a means based on the policy definition as equivalent of data disposal, because it depends on the organization based on the business requirement. If there is limited access control and it's the data is securely stored, can we consider that as
data disposal, right? Yeah. So restricted access, if you say, there are two aspects, right? One is, to maintain the confidentiality, right? Those who are only authorized should be able to access, others should not. So that's what we are calling restricted access. Now, how do you get that? Through authentication, right? Like all of us have MFA or passwords that make sure that confidentiality is maintained. The other aspect is that when the confidential, whoever needs to access confidential data, the data integrity is maintained. That is encryption. Now, with restricted access, if you see, you are not deleting data. Like even if you today, let's say, set up authentication password, data still lies there. We all know that passwords can be cracked, how unsecure they are, right? MFA is also not secure, which we saw in the Uber case. Even if you encrypt, maintaining the encryption key is another challenge, right? Encrypting means, you just, in the simple language, you're just scrambling that data, turning it into ciphertext. I have seen cases where, a lot of laptop users, they encrypt, but then the same encryption key, they keep it on, one of the text files. So if laptop is compromised, that can be received. So that was one aspect. But disposal here, what we are talking about, anything that was something that was deleted, can it be recovered? So anything which was not deleted, obviously it is at risk, right? It requires different controls. But something that you thought was deleted and can be recovered is what we were referring to as disposal issue. I hope that helps, Reena.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Next question was from Mr. Naveen Gupta. Mr. Naveen, if you are there, we'd like to ask that question. The question is, in cloud environment like AWS, how are we ensuring that my data not saved in some sort of caching even after we destroy?
See, this is where usually with cloud providers, and certain due diligence is important. That you look at their audit reports, you look at how they're complying, did they pass the audit, were there any findings? Because if you are hosting your customers' data in a premise that is owned by a third party, obviously then you have to rely on them for data sanitization. So I think you have every right to, question cloud providers if they are sanitizing. Most likely they may be doing at the end of the day. So questions can go that, if I would like to have that flexible approach, how I can do that. Especially for small or let's say mid-size colo type of data centers, what we have done, data centers, they are now offering Wipeout as a service. So what they do, they offer that on-demand option that we are talking about. Let's say I'm working on a code deployment or upgrading my code as the next release, and I have a sensitive data that is in my production environment, but as a temporary measure, I have migrated that into my UAT or QA environment or test environment for simplicity. So that environment, once these environments are typically environments with relaxed controls, right? So your colo provider might say that, he's deleted that image and all that, but with Wipeout as a service, this offers options for data centers provider to just on demand erase what you ask for and then offer that as a sanitization service. So that's something can be done. What I'll do, I'll maybe share additional document post this session so that even those details can be shared.
Thank you. Mr. Navin, your question is done. Supervisor has asked, do photocopiers and printers also store images of the copies or documents printed, requiring some data wipe or deletion prior to the of the copiers?
Yes, I think this we covered in the presentation. They do, because these devices have storage capacity. They can store, including the routers like we spoke about. They can store the configuration. And if you see in the past, some of these networking devices, they were also used for your voice calling, this hot, IP phones. And, all your voicemails, they kind of, in that setup get stored on your router's memory. So these are the risks, right? Just not endpoints. All devices that have storage capacity, the risk is definitely there. Yeah.
Subramanian sir, would you like to ask something else further to that?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to be the IT guy in charge, is there some configuration or something that you have to look for as to where this particular printer or photocopier can store images? There are hard disk in it that needs to be removed if you are trying to dispose of that machine at the end of the life.
Yes, definitely. I mean, even since the example here is printer, in the audits that I have been part of, printer decommissioning process is also one of the focus areas. So what is stored on the printer? What options are available from the OEM? Are you, factory resetting or wiping? Does your manufacturer clearly state that, after factory reset, there are no means of recovery that are known? And then, using the data recovery solution. So definitely it's area, and especially printers, we know that, in corporate, typically you have those big printers, and there are so many people, printing, and all the documents, they are queued. And then those documents, they are processed in that, memory stack. So, until the first one is cleared, the second one is still there. So in that setup, there is definitely a risk. And that one area, if I were IT professional, definitely, I would focus. I've seen that as a control in many, stringent environments, which is already in. So it should be implemented.
Mr. Deepak, if you are there, actually, Mr. Deepak has quite a few questions. Deepak, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Would you like to discuss this directly, or
Sure. So firstly, Mr. Kamane, very nice presentation. Thank you for your time. Uh, so my first question was that, see, these data wiping tools, lot of what happens is whenever there are lengthier retention periods, we tend to take backups and there are backup and archival solutions. Would these solutions, wiping solutions, have the capability to delete from the backup and archival solutions as well?
Yes. So as long as we know, which folder, which database schema, or which file that particular client's information is stored, all we need to do is that, get a software wiping tool on that system or do it remotely, and then it can certainly wipe.
Okay. So which means that the prerequisite is that you need to know the path of,
Yes. I mean,
and and would this wiping tool have a capability to have an inventorization done, or do you need a classification tool or something of that sort to create an inventorization and then have these paths available to you?
so the tool definitely helps you discover data in terms of, what could be your data, which is, let's say, for example, for this one client, the data, anything which is older than 7 years needs to be wiped. So the tool will help you to easily identify that data. And then all you need to do is put up a scheduler, wipe it, and it should be taken care of. Yeah, even if it is a database record, it can be done. Because a lot of times, what happens, this client data may not be, let's say, in a Excel file or folders, that simple format data. It could be sitting in a SQL server, MS SQL. So normally, just to delete one database record, obviously you won't delete the entire database, right, to permanently wipe. So this software does provide you option to selectively wipe those records. So it is possible. Yeah. Classification part, sorry if I did not answer that. Classification varies from company to company, but it's very easier to find that part, which is public, which is not public. Let's say if you through the help of tool, if you look for a string, let's say that has 10 characters, which might resemble some SSN number, or let's say 12 digit, or anything that matches sensitive data, it can be used to find out those patterns, and then it can be wiped. Yeah.
No, but usually, suppose if you're servicing multiple clients,
Hmm.
and say, for example, one client has met its retention requirements, right?
Hmm.
May it be contractually, may it be on a law perspective or regulatory perspective. Then you would need to rely on keywords rather than these very specific things, right? Because it's not only an Aadhaar number, which might be 16 character or something of that sort, or a PAN
Correct.
number. So then you will need this path, or you would need some keywords that would help you identify the data and then delete them.
Yes, yes. So this is where even what I mentioned, if I have to, further clarify that, let's say you have a database, one common database where you have 5 different clients, A, B, C, D, E, and E is the one which you want to, erase data. So, SQL query, let's say, you just search for something that matches E, right? E's records. It could be run and wiped. So that flexibility is there.
Okay, sure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Ms. Reena had one more question about this Wipeout. Does it create a log of deleted files for any auditor?
Yeah. So I think the question is also, does it run as an agent?
Run as
right?
an agent.
Yeah. So Wipeout has two, operating models for its core version. One is you can use it as a standalone, where you just manage on your laptop, and the other one, what we call, is enterprise, where you install Wipeout on your designated server and then clients, which allows you managing policies remotely, and remote wipeout also. The other question, can it create a log of deleted files? Yes. So everything that is wiped, the log is available through Excel files, PDF, whatever, CSV format. And on those logs, you can also create, like I was saying, certificate of data destruction. And that's the document, I think, what you want to probably, share with your auditors and then show your capabilities in terms of wiping data. Okay. Hope that helped. So logging is available extensively. We can log as much as you want, for any period of time, as long as we have storage available for those logs.
Reena, I hope that is clear. Now, next question is from Rakshit. Is it possible to enforce our internal group policies of data retention requirements in the tool? If not, then how the tool will identify the age of that particular data?
Right. So this is where, you just change the slide. So the second component here, storage analyzer. So this is where I was earlier giving example that, based on the data type, age, you can easily search, anything older than 5 years, 3 years, 2 years with certain strings, a lot of custom options. So that helps you find that data. The other part, retention requirements, yes. It could be your group policies, it could be your, your normal retention schedule, it could be driven from regulation. All of that can be converted into wipeout schedules. So I may have one schedule for, let's say, PCI DSS. I'm just throwing one example that, anything which is older than 3 months, I go and create a schedule called as PCI DSS. So it runs every 3 days. And I know that, any card holder data that I probably accidentally stored, collected, that will be wiped. So that flexibility is there. Hope that helps, Rakshit.
Yes, Santosh. Thank you for that response.
Thank you, Rakshit. Yeah. Right.
Deepak has one more question.
And this is very interesting question.
If accidentally we delete data through software wiping tool, is it possible to recover the data?
Yeah. See, it defeats the purpose, right? Because if you delete something and it has recovering capabilities, then it's a huge risk, right? If you can recover, then somebody else would recover too. So the idea is that, any data which is no longer required for processing, any data which is to be, because no sensitive data today should be on your laptops, desktops, on your servers, right? So all of this data needs to be wiped, once it is processed. I don't see any good reason for anybody to store sensitive data on their laptops and they're traveling everywhere. Maybe, they are on the airport, they're working from hotel, Starbucks, and their assets are not hardened. Like, for example, even if you take these CA firms these days, right? They have very, limited staff, 2-3 guys. They collect all your financial records, data, you share everything. But have we asked anytime to our CAs who may be managing your taxes and, financial planning, that all the data that you are collecting today through, emails and whatnot, how are you wiping it? Today, if I move to another service, what will you do? So, these are all open risks. Yeah. So data should not be recovered. And that's what the tool does. It's just like paper trader. Yeah.
The reason I asked that question is because the ease of deleting is very high, meaning you're saying at a click of a button, you can delete it. So, when a nuclear missile is to be launched, there are 2 people on different profiles need to come together. And this is right, so that's where it stemmed from, that suppose accidentally something happens and if your scheduler is gone wrong for some reason, then once lost, is it lost forever, or how do we do it?
Yeah, so this is where I think anything which is, past its retention time, stored on wrong, devices, on, let's say, mobile devices like, laptops and all that. And software does want, so there are two things. I mean, here, normally, by default, if you wipe something, there will be a confirmation, warning, just to make sure. But in the another setup, let's say you have a team working, right? And there is a supervisor, and there is somebody who is reporting to him in a finance department. Now, this analyst, he wipes something, right? Now, the supervisor is concerned that he might accidentally delete something. So, what we have a feature called as you can mark certain data which you think is very important as important data. So, in the enterprise setup, if the client wants to, let's say, starts to wipe something, then it will go to the supervisor or whoever is the designated person for approval. So in his, wipeout window, he'll say that, some person or this particular user is requesting to wipe this file. So should I approve? So that becomes additional layer of confirmation to this question, in the enterprise setup. So that feature is already there. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
That's all on the chat window. Anybody else having any question or any comments or like to add some inputs to this? Head Officer Mr. Anil Chiplankar, Mr. Bhimesh. Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Please do.
Yes, so even if there are any other questions, please feel free to reach out. And then I think I've shared my LinkedIn. There is a website, and then I'm easily accessible. So let me just share the info quickly. So while we talk, but really appreciate you guys joining and being so patient. Yeah. So this is the contact information.
Mr. Santosh is also there in our FDBP Telegram group.
Yeah, so I'm part of your Telegram group, so I can always be reached out for anything on data disposal, data retention, privacy.
Mr. Ramesh Kata, would you like to say something, some closing remarks?
Yeah, thank you. I think Santosh, this is really an excellent session. You covered all aspects. In fact, maybe anticipated some questions. I was also about to ask for that. How do you do network devices as well? And one of my roles, I think that was a question suggested by a committee saying that you're doing all the wipeouts and all the stuff, but what about sensitive devices like switches and routers? Sometimes we do it as a buyback or exchange. So that's where I think those challenges will come in terms of how to handle the process data, like you rightly said. The policy is written onto that and how it can be taken care. I think you can cover it very well. But again, I'm not sure, maybe we may have to work with the cybersecurity or cyber insurance teams as well to include this one of the cars. Because today they check it, but we really don't know whether they really look for this, because that's a risk, definitely.
Yeah.
Sometimes what happens is once they close it done, and then maybe the data might throw up or open up after some time, everyone lost the sight of it. So it's really a good session. Thanks for taking us through and walking all the steps. Thank you.